So while we all know to expect a big April Direct for Nintendo Switch 2 to take place this year in 2025, that is not actually the first Direct we should expect to see from Nintendo this year, because in today's video, I want to break down a couple different sources with highly reliable track records around Direct leaks, suggesting that we will be able to safely expect a Switch 1 focused February Direct, and one of these sources actually giving us a hint as to what game to expect, with a big return from a somewhat niche franchise that will be headed to Switch 1 with a brand new game. And I want to examine the history of Nintendo Directs in February, even if you don't want to buy into the leaks and rumors, and just reassure Nintendo fans we are actually relatively close to this news dropping, and there's actually some reason to believe that the Direct will be taking place earlier in the month of February as opposed to the later portion of the month. And we have to talk about all of the exciting Switch 1 software that we will likely see focused on at this event. So we'll get on the same page with all of this info right after a quick word from today's video sponsor, Nacon. If you like fun, fast-paced, engaging roguelike action games, you'll want to pay attention to this. Raven's Watch is finally out on Nintendo Switch as of January 23rd, 2025. After over a year in early access and 700,000 plus players jumping in on PC and console, it's here and better than ever. You've got 9 playable heroes to choose from, all inspired by classic folk tales, and you can take on all of the challenges this game has to throw at you in either solo or co-op play with up to 3 additional friends. The more you play a hero, the stronger they get, unlocking new abilities and letting you tweak their role. Need a heavy hitter, a healer? You get to decide. And on January 30th, the free Nightmares Unleashed update brings cross-platform play so you and your friends can team up no matter where you play. And like any good true roguelike, each run is different with 3 biomes that change up enemies every time, keeping things fresh. And if you're like me and enjoy a good challenge in this type of game, you can crank up the difficulty, or you can apply game modifiers to make it as easy or as brutal as you want. And the best part is more content will be available through free updates and DLCs. Help support the brands that support me and go check out Raven's Watch for Nintendo Switch, available in the link in my description and pinned comment down below. Huge thank you to Nacon for sponsoring today's video. So first, I want to highlight the credible names that we do have suggesting that a February Direct is on the table and will take place relatively soon, as we first have PH Brazil and a post from him making the rounds online. You might remember this individual because we covered them a lot in 2024. Most things ended up checking out to be true, but there were definitely some big misses, because he did hear at some point there was going to be an April Direct in 2024 that never happened. Funnily enough, April is the Direct date for Switch 2 in 2025, so not that Nintendo won't do a Direct in that month, but he definitely had it wrong on that portion. But he was the big source that pulled off something that I would say is just a little bit too much of a lucky guess, where he was stating things like Nintendo would be moving forward multiple Direct presentations towards the end of August as opposed to their typical September time slot for things like an Indie World and a partner showcase that we actually saw merged together at the end of the month, and a Nintendo Museum Direct that took place a couple weeks before that. So some very uncommon moves from Nintendo last month, and we did have the inside info due to PH Brazil. And after the Switch 2 reveal, he was seen on Family Board saying what a wild ride it's been, and thankfully the February Direct is just around the corner. Now I think from a logic-based perspective, this also makes a lot of sense to see a Direct in February, because if you look at Nintendo's release roadmap right now, we know of one game with a release date, and that is Xenoblade Chronicles X. Of course, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Pokemon Legends ZA are also slated for 2025 as Nintendo Switch software releases, but we don't have any dates for those. And if the Switch 2 Direct is believed to be that, a Switch 2 focused Direct, we would likely need to find out some additional dates, not just on that Switch 1 software, but some other unannounced Switch 1 games, because Nintendo's not going to just let Switch 1 software support truly fall off a cliff once they start marketing their next gen console. There is still 140 plus million active Switch owners out there that are still looking to buy software. So 2025 will no doubt have a lot more Switch 1 content to come, and we have to have an event to learn about some of that. If you don't like PH Brazil's track record so much though, one person you should be paying attention to at this point, if you're not already, is none other than Nate the Hate. And in the same podcast that he dropped the reveal date for Nintendo Switch 2 way ahead of time, before anybody else was talking about it online, and basically stuck to his guns, saying that a reveal would be happening on January 16th, literally Donkey Kong Country Returns HD launch date. Not a common date for many to predict out there if you're just trying to be a fake insider, quote unquote. And Nate the Hate has gotten way too much right over the course of time. If you think he's a fake insider, I don't know what to do to prove to you otherwise, but no doubt plans change sometimes, and nobody's 100% perfect with an insider track record because internal plans do shift around. But for the most part, Nate the Hate is on the money, specifically with direct presentations, and he suggested in that podcast that Nintendo would be holding some kind of Switch 1 focused direct in the month of February before we would get to the bigger Switch 2 focused presentation. But if you truly don't like to pay attention to any insiders or rumors or leak talk online, you just have history on your side, where last year, even in a year where Nintendo didn't have a ton of first-party content lined up, at least from like a brand new game perspective, like they've clearly been working on Switch 2 games for quite a while behind the scenes at this point. We saw lots of ports and remasters, and they didn't have a ton of new first-party stuff to show off. Well, we still got a partner direct on February 21st in 2024, and they even closed out that partner direct with Endless Oceans Luminous, which is a Nintendo published piece of software. The year before that, on February 8th, 2023, we saw them hold a mainline traditional Nintendo Direct where they outlined a bunch of software for all of that 2023 lineup, even a shadow drop of Metroid Prime 1 Remastered, which plays into the conversation of what games we should be able to expect at this February's Direct that we will tackle a little bit later on. And the year prior to that, in 2022, we had the Direct on February 9th, also earlier in the month, and we had another full-scale mainline Direct that year. 2021, also a full mainline Nintendo Direct presentation. It was held on the 17th that year. 2020, the world was in chaos, of course, if you remember, and we had a Animal Crossing Direct still hitting in the month of February, but then a Nintendo Direct Mini taking place on March 26th, which did outline some more of Nintendo's first-party software lineup. You go back to 2019, we have February 13th and a full-scale mainline Direct presentation. Prior to that, the Nintendo Switch was still in its infancy, and in 2018, we got a March 8th Direct, and in 2017, we got an April 12th Direct, as opposed to those reliable February dates otherwise. You might say that due to the fact that Nintendo's already communicated a Direct in the month of April, that it makes it less likely that they would hold their traditional February Nintendo Direct. But again, if you just look at their software release lineup for the Switch 1, I think it's safe to expect, at the bare minimum, the worst case scenario would be some kind of partner showcase Direct where they have those contractual obligations with partners that we know about, where they would at least have to highlight some of their games. But I am personally expecting a full mainline Direct to line out a lot of the software for Nintendo Switch 1 as kind of the swan song Direct for Nintendo Switch 1, because from here, when you talk about the June and September Direct that will likely take place later this year, that's going to be primarily Nintendo Switch 2 software, albeit with some Switch 1 ports and remasters that might be on the easier side for Nintendo to bring over to the console. But Nintendo does truly believe in console generations and is typically very quick to move on to supporting their new, latest and greatest piece of hardware, instead of doing the more Sony and Microsoft release the games on both generations of consoles simultaneously for a few years because you're worried about not selling the bigger numbers of pieces of software. I think Nintendo's going to fully dive into the Switch 2 and the technical capabilities that it's able to handle and just start creating all of their games from the ground up for that. I think that that's what they've already been doing, and that's why these ports and remasters projects become that much more likely for Switch 1 software. And that's where I want to pivot the conversation to briefly talk about some of the leaks, rumors around what kind of software we can expect from a Nintendo Switch focused Direct in the month of February. And the first series we have to talk about as a whole that I do think will show up here in a big way, it is none other than Metroid. And I do think that there are two likely things that we will learn from this Direct in relation to Metroid, and that is a Prime 4 Beyond release date, which may be around the launch of Nintendo Switch 2. I don't think it's the launch title. I do think that the Mario Kart game or a 3D Mario is looking more likely for that, but I think that around the launch time of the Switch 2, maybe in the month of May, Metroid Prime 4 could indeed drop. Maybe it's a June title, but there could be a Switch 2 version for that game in addition to a Switch 1 version. I think it's the one game that Nintendo may actually truly treat as a cross-generational title with its own retail box and version version for each respective console. That is just speculation. I don't know that Nintendo will end up doing that, but it is something that I could see them doing. And because Prime 4 has the number 4 in it, I do also believe that Nintendo will bring to market and allow gamers to play through Prime 2 and 3 easily on modern hardware ahead of that date. So if we learn the date is in May or June for Prime 4's release, I think that a shadow drop announcement of Prime 2 and 3 at the February showcase, where you can download them later that day on the eShop, and then a physical release coming later on in the month of March, very similar to that of how we saw them handle Prime 1 remastered. I think that's on the table here, but I am expecting it to be more in line with how Nintendo treated Pikmin 1 and 2, where the 2 and 3 Prime games are just thrown together as a bundle pack. They may or may not look as impressive from a visual standpoint as the Prime 1 remastered, and maybe they just sell them for $60. Here's your other 2 Prime adventures to get caught up on the entire series before you walk into Prime 4, and you can play it now digitally or pick it up next month physically. I think something like that happens at this presentation, and I do think that all of the modern quality of life enhancements with the controls and things will all be baked in out of the box for those 2 games. And you might remember we do have names like Nate the Hate and Jeff Grubb all hearing that Prime 2 and 3 were in the works somewhere once upon a time at Retro Studios, and there's no reason to believe that they've been totally canned. So I do think we see these games ultimately released before Prime 4's retail and digital launch date. Now from there, I want to briefly hop back to PH Brazil and another rumor that he has put out there for a new piece of Switch 1 software that will feature a somewhat niche franchise returning with a brand new big game. So you can see this article over on My Nintendo News, which states, rumor PH Brazil says Switch to get one big final Nintendo game from beloved and somewhat niche series. Now, there have since been some clarifications to PH Brazil's original post around this, but the long and short of it is what PH Brazil is teasing from his own words is a brand new entry in a somewhat niche, beloved franchise by Nintendo fans that will be headed to Switch 1. A new entry, not some kind of port or remaster. So any of like the Wind Waker, Twilight Princess ideas, or F-Zero GX or something like that you might be thinking of, some kind of simple port project. No, this is actually a brand new entry within whatever franchise he is referencing here. And while there are plenty of hopes, dreams, and ideas of what it might be, let me know in the comments down below what franchise you hope is getting a brand new entry that's somewhat niche and also a beloved Nintendo fan franchise. And my personal prediction around it is actually Star Fox. I do think that Star Fox might get something at the tail end of the Nintendo Switch life cycle with a brand new release. We did actually have a separate, entirely unverified rumor from Samus Hunter, who I don't pay too much attention to, but no doubt they were flawless in 2024 with their information, but then they started to talk a lot more online after they got some things right, and it sounds like they went back to their old ways. They haven't been proved wrong or anything, but I have some red flags with them personally. Anyway, take it or leave it, but they made a direct reference to Star Fox Zero and kind of getting a new game that's in a different direction than what Star Fox Zero was in. And she actually suggested that classic Zelda fans would be a fan of this style of adventure game that is a brand new thing that's coming out. So if you give any stock to this rumor, I do like the idea of Nintendo, now that they're so focused on open air, open world exploration for Zelda games for their massive new 3D projects. I do think there's absolutely a void to be filled with the more linear style progression of a 3D action adventure game, similar to that of how you progress in a Zelda game, and with dungeons and puzzles and all of the stuff that we know from the classic 3D era Zelda games. I think that Nintendo could plug in another one of their franchises to be that replacement. And Star Fox, if you look at Star Fox Adventures, that might be the perfect fit if they went more in that direction and refined some of the things in Star Fox Adventures and just gave them a whole new game from the ground up. I would very much be a fan of that, and I wouldn't be opposed to it being mixed, where you're in space sometimes doing that more shooter intensive focused gameplay, but other times you're just exploring the grounds of these planets that you're going to in great length, and there are specific dungeons at the end of each planet that you have to beat with a cool boss fight at the end. Like, I think that this kind of thing makes sense for Nintendo to do with one of their franchises, and I'm hopeful that Star Fox, maybe even Kid Icarus, would be a good fit for this. I'm thinking somewhat niche franchise. Some people would consider maybe Donkey Kong niche nowadays, just because of how little support we saw for him with new content in the Switch era, but I don't actually consider Donkey Kong niche. I think that with his revamp of the theme park and all of the stuff we're seeing them focus on with the mainstream movies and Mario and all of that, Donkey Kong is not a niche franchise in my opinion, and I don't think, even though it got forgotten for a while by Nintendo, I think we're going to get a big new Switch 2 DK game. But maybe Star Fox comes out late in Switch 1 and is able to be sold to all of those 140 million plus base Switch owners out there right now. Kirby Planet Robobot is another game that I think is a safe prediction to see at this Nintendo Direct, because Nate the Hate specifically stated that as a game that's coming to Switch 1 in 2025, and I do think we will see that. It's another 3DS port that just lines up with what Nintendo's been doing, and again, good track record from Nate the Hate. I trust him. I think it's coming to Switch. Something Zelda is absolutely on the table for 2025, and I personally am hoping for Zelda Wind Waker, because we had those Korean translations straight from Nintendo's own official Zelda timeline pop up and some Russian retail listings for this game recently, so it's possible that Nintendo has indeed had Wind Waker and or Twilight Princess finished this whole time. They're sitting on them and waiting for the right time to release them, and maybe in the transition year to new console hardware where they want to continue to support the Switch 1, that is the perfect type of game to bring over to Switch 1 and re-release it, Wind Waker HD, on the Nintendo Switch. That is a possibility, and while I would love to see it at this February Direct, I could also see that one being saved for a later in the year presentation like your June or September Direct. But nonetheless, something Zelda happening in 2025 I personally believe is very likely. But that's really where I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What, if any, games or franchises are you most excited to hopefully see featured at this final Switch 1 Focus Direct that we should safely be able to expect in the month of February? Do you think this Direct will be happening earlier into the month like I do? I should mention briefly at the closeout of this video, the Nintendo Financial Investor Briefing will be on February 4th. There is some level of a history of Nintendo going shortly after their investor briefings with direct presentations on a pretty quick turnaround in the past, though it is very possible that that second week of February, or maybe even the week of their investors briefing on that Wednesday or Thursday, that we see a Direct take place. But if that does not happen, I very much like the dates of February 11th, 12th, and 13th, all as strong possibilities for when this presentation will drop from Nintendo. And let me know which, if any, games you'd be picking up day one if they are indeed at this first of the year Nintendo Switch 1 Focus Direct. So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.